Hello, welcome back to BlenderSushi live noding. In this video, I'm going to do another stacking exercise, but this time I'm using animation node instead of Sverchok, and I'm going to do it in 2D just for simplicity for now. So as you can see here in the 3D view, I have this like a square. If you imagine, I'm like stacking the square in that directions. Currently, you can see this square and they kind of touching each other and perfectly, and I can change the maybe randomize the size of the box and then the minimum height, and as you can see they are all adjusting accordingly. So that's kind of the end result we're gonna do. This is actually more like a little bit of there's a little bit of math and a little bit of programming involved. If I show you the final node tree, it's maybe a little bit intimidating, but I will try to go through each one of the process, and hopefully this is going to be useful for you. And yeah, so this is the end result. Once again, I can randomize the grid, probably the length of the grid, like that. That's the width, but the length actually controlled procedurally, and I can randomize the length and it will adjust accordingly. And if I want to have more boxes, I can do that quite easily, and it will continue generate for us. So there, that's the end result. Let's do it and start from scratch. Let's delete this default cube. Let's hide the lamp and the camera. Switch to Node 3 compositing editor, animation nodes, and start from scratch. Okay, I will start with a grid mesh, and I know that I will be needing these, and I will also output the result as object mesh, object output, and plug in the mesh data and polygon indices, create a new target, and that's what we get. Currently by default the diffusion is 10 by 10. We don't need that, we just need like a square like that. And instead of step, I will change this to size, so we can have control over the length and the width. So which one you want to use is totally up to you. Basically we're gonna try to stack all these squares procedurally. So this IN stacking and 001. I'll turn off always and just have frame change and property change and tree change for now, so it doesn't slow down Blender. Okay, so we have this single square, but you want to create duplicates procedurally. So what do? We need to have loop. So let's quickly create a loop. And normally the way I think of generating objects in animation nodes is I always start from object instances actually. So object instancer, I know this is gonna be polygon mesh, so I turn off copy from source, and I'll give it like maybe 5. And in fact, instead of starting from a loop like this, I tend to like to do it from here. Just tap W and loop through objects. Now we have the same thing, except that we have this created automatically. So this is the object instances, but it's still currently empty. So now with all we need to do is to plug this guy into that guy, and now we have a bunch of objects created, but they are all on the same spot. We can delete the original target there, but we already have the 5 instances at the moment. They are all in the same spot though. If we want to arrange them, we can easily use object transform output and plug this object there, and you know, if you with the location there, if we use the index plug into the y, for example, the index plug into the y, you can see they're arranged. And if we add math, not Euler math, sorry, if I use this number, float math, plug in the index, plug this guy into that guy, set this to multiply, so eventually we can have this kind of arrangement. So this is already like a procedural, but at the moment each square is actually the same size, so this is not this is pretty cool, but stacking like this is not it's not particularly interesting. We kind of want to randomize the in this case the width, so we're gonna keep the length the same size, maybe 5, but we want to change the length, the width, and randomize the width somewhat. And we want it so that no matter what random width we assign to each of the square, we want it to be stacked properly and touching each other. So how are we going to do that? We need a bit of math, okay? So basically, the way I'm going to do it is if I imagine each one of them like an individual, I want them to be kind of on the ground first, kind of like normalize. Imagine this x-axis is actually the ground. I want each of these blocks to be on the ground, okay? But I want to randomize the width first for now, so I'm gonna use random number and plug in the index into the seed. Let's give like a random minimum and maximum and plug this into the width. Now I have a random width for each of the boxes. I can randomize the seed. Let's normalize each one of this square first. The way I'm going to do it is kind of just dividing the length, just dividing this the width by half, and then kind of offset each one of them using that value, because that's how you do it. If you have like an object like this cube, and I reset the cube, if I want to put this cube on the floor, I kind of need to offset the cube by half of its height. So that's the main idea. So we know the width for each individual square is actually coming from this guy, so we can use a math, Euler math, no, actually float math, and use this value and divide it by half, divide by 2. and the result's going to be offsetting the location. It's going to be but in the not in the x, but in the y directions. Now, if you can see each one of the instance, they are placed on the ground, which is the x-axis. Okay, that's cool. That's working according to the plan. The next thing we need to do, actually, simply offsetting each one of these guy. Let's see, if I have only like 3 instances, let's observe this guy for now. So I have 3 instances, and I wanna see what's actually the value is doing. I'm gonna use the debug loop. Let's see the value from this guy first, and have a look here. Apparently I need to update it. So this is the width for each of this object, okay? And the first one, let's check the dimension. First one is 2.04, so it's this guy. I'm gonna create a duplicate. That guy is 2.04. The second one is 4.444, which is this guy. And the third one is 3.352. That's the width of this object. And if you want to stack them on top of each other, we basically only need to offset the first one, offset it by 0, the second one, offset it by the length of the first object, and the third one, offset it by the length of the first object added and the second object. So this is the offset for this guy. Okay, that's basically the math behind it. If you actually want to use this square to create like a 2D buildings, you can actually do that. I'm gonna show you that first. So you can see this is like a random. Imagine there like a building of that tall. I can kind of put them in line. I use line mesh. Actually, don't use line mesh. Just use the index of each object and then align them in the X. Something like that. So you can see this it's all procedural. It's really cool. You can have control over the minimum and the maximum. So yeah, they're quite a nice 2D building. Let me turn off the parent, the relationship editor, relationship lines. Okay, now it's cleaner. I'll also make the background a little bit brighter. Something like that. Alright, let's turn this back into smaller value, and we don't need the grid anymore. Maybe we keep the X and the Y grid axis. Well, anyhow, like I said, currently each object is being offset by the half of their width, so they're flush on the ground. And in order to stack all this building together, all we need to do is just offset the first one with 0. You know, we don't need to offset the first one, it's already correct. The second one, we offset it using the length, the width length of the first object. The third object needs to be offset by the length of this guy, and this guy should be offset by the length of that guy. So we kind of have that, we need that kind of accumulative effect. And in order to do that, we need to use our knowledge from previously, where we use a loop and we kind of adding the loop, just reassigning the value into the first. Okay, let's do that before we get too confused with this. So we can close this. Actually, just leave it like that. We need a value that can kind of grow, so I will create a new parameter and call it, should be a float, and it's 0 at first, but we're gonna add the length into this guy, the length of each object. So in this one, I'm gonna open this panel, and in the advanced node settings, I'm gonna use the float value, right? This is gonna be the length of that guy. So I will reassign. Click on reassign, and then here my loop float will get reassigned by this guy, the length of each square. Now if we check out the result of the float, I'm gonna frame this real quick, join in the new frame. So I'm gonna frame this because they are related. Now the output of this guy, if we check using debug drawer, is a 0. First one is 0, second one is the length of the first square, and then next one, and the next one, and the next one. If I open the one as an example that I already done, this is AN grid stacking, I'm gonna have the same thing. Let's switch the instance to 5. So this is basically what we have in the previous blend file. The same thing. With the float, and then min and max, and here we can see the length. You can see this float is actually being added by the length of this guy. So, and the output goes into this guy, which is reassigned back into the float number. So I gotta go back to this guy, and with this float we're gonna use math, plug in this guy and this guy together, and the output's gonna be that guy reassigned. And this is what we get. This is the list what we get. To do what we are doing though, just to offset this guy, We don't need the last one, but we need the first one to be 0. So we kind of need a way to make a new list that we can so that we can offset this guy. Now I'm gonna jump back to the example, grid stacking. So we have this guy, the same result, and what's happening here is I'm using the list slice. I actually slice this list, so I get rid of the last one, and I'm appending another number here, so I have a new list like that. So I'm basically let's maximize this guy a little bit and have a look. So this is the original list that we get by appending the value, kind of reassigning the value, and then so basically we have the length. We have like a number that's being added. So this is the result, which is 5 value that get accumulated over time. We don't need the last value, like I said, to do our offset. So I'm slicing the list and appending 0 in front of it. So this is the offset that we need. So once we get this list, we are basically ready to go. From the first loop up here, I'm outputting the object and the object list, and that's what we get. And from this object list and float list, I'm basically doing another loop here that's just simply offsetting the objects once more. So I guess that's pretty clear, even though it's a bit convoluted. Basically, what I did, if I draw this real quick, let's use Grease Pencil. So the first loop actually generate a random square, right? Each one of them have the different kind of width, and then I am actually normalizing it using the half of its height. So I'm already offsetting them, so they are all normal and they're sitting on the floor, on the ground. And with the next loop I'm using this reassign thing in the loop, so that I can get the length of the first object, and then the list keep growing, adding the length of the first object and the second object, and then the list keep growing, adding the length of the first object, second object, and the third objects, and so on. Okay, dot dot dot. So that's the list that we get by accumulating, by reassigning the loop. Okay, and using that list, I'm actually kind of slicing it. So we don't need the last one. We need this one and this one and this one and this one, but we need also the first one to be 0, because if we want to stack these 5 objects on top of each other, the first one actually already in the correct position. The second one should be offsetted by the length of the first object. So, and the third one should be offsetted by the length of the first and the second object. So, and so on and so on. So this is an interesting problem, I think. Can be difficult to see this in the node kind of relationship. If you use a programming language, it could be simpler, but I'm also like I'm like more like a node kind of guy. I like noding and thinking about pattern in nodes. For me, it's much easier than using program. But eventually, you know, if whether you are coding or you're noding, it's all about this kind of how to work with a spreadsheet, to work with all this data, like stream of data, and kind of thinking how to modify the data to work the way you want it. So continue on. The fourth object should be offsetted by the length of the first, second, and third added together. So if all working together as planned, we get what we need, which is something like this. Let me give it a different color so it's look nicer. Okay, so that's basically the result that we are expecting. We can randomize the width. We can have unlimited number of instances, and each one is different. And then the cool thing about this, of course, if we switch to cycle render, and let's give these objects a material, cycles material. So okay, this material. Select all the object, link it to the last one. Control L, link the material. So each one of them has the same material. I switch to cycles. Material output. Oh wait a minute. Select the objects. There you go. I can give a random color into each one of these. Let's say random objects info, and use random, plug into the color. There you go. Random color for each one of them. And if we go back to animation nodes, we can randomize the seed. We can have like 100 of these objects and update it. It should update accordingly. Maybe I need to refresh this. Okay, I need to reassign the material. I think with there is one node that can assign a material. Cycles material output, material. There must be like object material output here, but anyway, I'm gonna select all the object and then select this guy and link the material once again and re-render. So this is what we get. Yeah, kind of really nice. It feels slightly complex, but again, like I said, it's once you understand it, it's actually quite simple. Here we can randomize the width like that. It's gonna update accordingly. Randomize the seed, and yeah, that's the result we're getting. And I think it's it's kind of useful and something you will definitely encounter one day if you're doing this noding stuff. Stacking is it's an interesting problem. Anyway, hopefully this video is useful for you. I'll leave a comment if you have another idea or another way that this can be more simplified. If you like the video, please leave like and subscribe to the channel. I will try to make